Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we trade Wi-Fi bars for church bells, GPS for hedgerows, and next day shipping for market days where even the geese run their own committee. Why was the period called the Dark Ages? If this cosy story helps you drift off, please subscribe, tap like, and leave a gentle comment. Your support keeps the journey continues. We'll wander the so-called Dark Ages as they felt from the inside. We begin when night begins. Your phone gives a small square of light, a pocket sunrise you can summon with a thumb. Imagine setting it face down. The glow slips away. Now picture a room where light is not a matter of battery percentage, but of ember and patience. A hearth stands low and wide, its brick rim warm to the touch. The window is not glass, but thin horns scraped to translucence, more like a fingernail than a pane. Good for privacy, less good for counting stars. A rushlight leans in a little iron holder, a twist of plant fibre soaked in tallow. The air carries a sweet smoke that knows every rafter. On the pallet in the corner, straw whispers when someone sits, and a woolen blanket, heavy, loyal, faintly sheepish, waits to meet your knees. You're here at the edge of someone's day in what many still call the Dark Ages. The room is small, the night is long. The light, however, here it is, circling you like a friendly dog. Before we settle into the rhythm of the place, a quiet note on the name. Dark Ages is one of those labels that fit quickly and imperfectly, like a borrowed cloak. Historians remind us that darkness usually means a shortage of written sources, not a shortage of human skill or feeling. The centuries after the western half of the Roman Empire unravelled, roughly the 5th through the 10th in much of Western Europe, were not one single season and not uniformly dark. In some regions, towns shrank, in others, they held or only drowsed. Roads grew uncertain, but paths multiplied. Learning moved to new addresses. People married, quarrelled, sewed, sang, and slept. If the word dark lingers, let it be the kind of dark you meet when you leave a lamplit room for the outdoors. At first you can't see much. After a while, shapes bloom and you realise how much there is to notice. It is a useful kind of seeing for bedtime, where we let our vision slow down until it can catch softer light. So what challenges press in on this little household as night gathers? In many regions, political maps shift like sand under waves. A local count or a petty king claims dues, another argues the claim, a third promises protection on market day for a toll at the bridge. For most families, high politics is distant thunder. What matters is whether the road is passable, whether a neighbour's ox is healthy, whether the mill downstream keeps its temper and doesn't swell from rain. Travel is a wager. Horses are costly, carts need repairs, rivers can decide they are somewhere else today. News travels in person, feet in mud, voices over bread. You learn to trust knowledge that smells of weather. It's less according to the latest post and more, Merritt's cousin came through Tuesday and saw the ford. It is slower, but it is also thick with names and places you can point to with an actual finger. Living conditions press close, they are literal. The floor is beaten earth or rough plank. The door lifts on an iron latch that weighs pleasantly in the hand, an object that could keep secrets if it spoke. Smoke wanders. Chimneys are not always certain things, and smoke is like a neighbour with time on their hands. It visits. Beds are sacks of straw or reeds, sometimes stretched on ropes that benefit from a good tug. Yes, sleep tight may be the legacy of such evenings, though sources debate the phrase like polite uncles at a feast. Clothing is practical poetry. Wool in most seasons, linen when you can, layers that remember rainstorms you've survived. A cloak at night is a blanket with opinions. Shoes are stitched and restitched. A belt knife works all day and then rests on the sill. Dishes are wood, horn or clay. A cup earns its keep by serving as measure, spoon and comfort. If you look for decoration you find it where hands fall. A carved twist on a spoon handle, a stitched cross at the edge of a sleeve, a little brass brooch that holds cloth and memory together. The room is not large, but nothing in it is useless. We step carefully around illness, an old roommate that keeps few hours. Many communities know the feel of fevers and coughs that linger, of wounds that heal or do not, of pains that drift through families like fog. Explanations are local and layered. Humour's out of balance. Bad air at dusk, saints listening for specific prayers. Herbs gathered by the patient and the practiced. Plantain, yarrow, willow. A midwife knows how to wait her, how to speak quietly, how to use clean cloth when the hour arrives. In some centuries, waves of disease pass through, silent except for the absence they leave. We will not tally them now. We can say gently that people learn to read bodies without lab tests, to read seasons without climate models, to read the sound of the well bucket in January. Compared to today, there is less painkillers on shelf and more pain's little negotiations. A warmed stone wrapped in cloth for stiffness, a decoction sipped slowly, a prayer woven into the act of holding a hand. It is not a golden age of health, it is an age of attention. That is a skill physicians still value, though now they have machines that hum and graphs that climb like ivy. Hunger is a shadow that shortens and lengthens with the year. In good seasons, barley, rye and oats fill sacks, beans and peas rattle cheerfully. A pig grows tubs around on the kitchen scraps. In lean ones, bread is darker, stretched with chestnut or acorn meal in some regions, and the table makes the most of broth. Salt is wealth in a handful, and winter is a puzzle solved by barrels. Salted fish, salted pork, pickled greens. The hearth is not only light, it's preservation. Smoke winds its way into hanging meat and declares itself future food. Compared to your fridge, the humming rectangle that is a summer meadow in a box, this is a daily arrangement, not a device. You budget not only coins but calories. You notice joy's simple address. The first green, the first eggs, the first day the mill wheel turns without complaint. A modern app might call these notifications. Here, it's just the door opening and someone saying, look. Another challenge, knowing where you stand in law and custom. There is law, yes, tradition written in memory, sometimes written on parchment if you can reach a court or a scriptorium. There are rights attached to land, to water, to woodlots you enter certain days of the year with the right number of neighbours. There are dues owed to lords who provide protection and sometimes justice, and those dues might be paid in kind. A measure of grain, a day's labour repairing a fence, a cartload of timber. These customs vary by valley and by village. You learn them from elders and from your own small mistakes. Compared to modern bureaucracy, which can be impersonal to the point of comfort, forms, portals, hold music, this is intimacy as a legal system. Everyone knows if you didn't show up for the ditching day. It is inconvenient and also strangely accountable. If you need a character reference, it comes with bread. Now, is it truly dark? Listen to the steadiness of craft. A weaver maps patterns in her hands. A smith judges temperature by colour. By the way scale blows away in small stars when he lifts the hammer. By the smell you could taste if you wanted to. A carver's knife whispers along green wood, learning the curve that will be a spoon's head. In a monastery cell, a scribe leans into a page that glows with patience. He is copying law, or a sermon, or a fragment of poetry that crossed mountains on a roll of vellum and survived by being loved. He sands the ink with fine dust. He will finish a page today, and the page will outlive him. If learning is not in the street, it is in these rooms, in these hands. You might say the cloud is smaller, but the backups are impressive. Libraries become networks of promise, their letters quietly walking over hills in satchels. Even the night feels structured. Many people go to sleep early and in layers, beds like nested bowls, parents, children, sometimes guests or servants nearby. Warmth shared because fuel is dear and warm, blood is efficient. Sources suggest that in many regions people experience what some historians call first sleep and second sleep, a pattern of resting, waking briefly into the middle hours to tend the fire or visit a neighbour or say a psalm, and then sleeping again until light thickens behind the horn window. If you wake tonight at 3, it doesn't mean you failed sleep. It means you share a rhythm with people who counted time by stars and habits. In a world where clocks were rare and noisy, the night itself offered gentle intervals. Your smartwatch might suggest mindful breathing. Here, the embers play the coach. Markets flicker in this world like constellations. On certain days, you set out with eggs padded in straw with a small wedge of cheese with a length of homespun you hope will fetch salt. The road is not empty. It is not jammed either. You meet a woman with a bundle of willow withes, a boy tripping under a sack of wool, a priest walking with a stick that keeps as many dogs away as it blesses. The town, when you reach it, is more a knot than a sprawl. A church with a square that can be a courtroom, a handful of booths smelling of spice and damp wool, a blacksmith's fire always awake, and a miller's laugh that tries to convince you he is honest today, unusually honest. Compared to modern logistics, with barcodes and pallets and tracking numbers, this is a system of faces. It is a little risky, it is also human. You test a measure with your own cup. You remember that someone once shaved the scale. You remember who did not. Belief wraps around all this like a cloak that can be mended and inherited. The calendar keeps feast days like buttons, fastening communities to a shared sense of time. Bells tell you what the hour feels like, if not exactly what it is. The saints, local and grand, offer a map of hopes. A shrine at a crossroads collects its own weather. On winter nights, someone tells a story about a king whose name resembles 3 different names, depending on which aunt you ask. In a landscape of uncertainty, meaning collects in rituals you can recite and in tasks you complete. Keep the fast, keep the fire, keep the seed dry. Compared to modern choice, which can be so wide it feels like a cliff, this is narrower and therefore calmer. If you want to make a New Year's resolution, you choose to finish the fence and to be kinder to the cow. It is specific and therefore achievable. Let's walk back to the room where you started. The door's latch slides into its place with the contentment of a spoon finding its bowl. Someone pushes straw into the ticking and pats it until it learns the shape of a shoulder. A child yawns and looks like their grandparent for a second. The last light of the rush dips and the wick smokes a little, then relents. A potter's moved closer to the embers and will keep whispering to itself for another hour. The day has been counted and stored. A few eggs, a story from the mill, the weather's opinion of tomorrow. The blanket climbs to your waist. The blanket climbs to your chest. Wool's particular kindness is that it breathes like a living thing. You think briefly of all the lives that must be moving through the dark night. Chieftains with unhelpful advisors, scribes with ink-stained sleeves, travellers calculating how many steps remain to the next hedge. Then your circle shrinks, by choice, until it is just this warm rim of bricks and the weight of your own breath. If you need a final modern comparison, think of the Do Not Disturb setting, but carved into time itself. Looking forward, we will wake with this household and watch morning arrive not with fanfare but with chores and bread. We will step outside and learn how the work meets weather, and how a day turns into enough fuel, enough food, enough warmth, enough company to carry the next night without complaint. For now, let the name Dark Ages recede like a mistaken rumour, not gone but corrected by what you've seen. The room is plain, yes, and the world beyond it can be troubled, but light persists here because someone tends it, someone who knows the stove's moods, the door's hinge, the way straw stiffens in winter and loosens in spring. This is the truth that makes the nickname complicated. If you stand in this doorway and look inside, you don't see darkness. You see stewardship. You see small economies of care, banking the fire, sharing a loaf, making the latch catch, placing a wooden cup near the heat so it will not shock when filled. If the age is dark, it is the kind of dark that keeps starlight visible. And as your eyes adjust, you realise the room has been full all along, not with brightness, with attention. When you close your eyes, the little circle of firelight remains on the screen behind your eyelids, warm as a thought you plan to keep. It will be here when we return, when the next part opens the door and morning steps in. Until then, the night is a quilt, and the room you have learned by heart is one stitched square. Sleep comes like a slow traveller deciding this is the right house to stop at because the latch is strong, and the hearth knows its work, and the blanket has that familiar wool smell that means you live in a world that remembers you. Dawn arrives without fanfare the way a well-behaved guest arrives. Quiet, on time, not offended if no one is at the door. The hearth remembers its duty from the night. Under the pale ash, a line of red waits like a thought that survived sleep. A hand slides in with the confidence of long practice, coaxes splinters and shavings to the ember, and then a stick. Heat spreads the way good news does, by contact and encouragement. The room lifts from grey to a warmer grey. A pot that kept its place all night takes on purpose again. The horn window gathers a little sky. You are in the same house as last night, but now the walls know they will be looked at, and even the iron latch seems to settle into its hinge with morning pride. The first errands are practical and non-negotiable. Water must arrive before the day properly begins. In many villages, a path leads to a shared well or to a stream that keeps its own calendar. A yoke across the shoulders makes 2 buckets behave like one responsibility, and the walk home is a lesson in balance and patience. Compared to a modern tap, this is a meeting, not a button. Cold on the fingers in winter, sweet in the mouth when the year is kind. People know the character of their water with the intimacy city dwellers reserve for coffee preferences. If it tastes of iron, there is a story about the field uphill. If it is cloudy after rain, there is a memory of the stream's temper. Boiling water is ordinary. So is brewing a weak ale or a light beer for a safety, the ferment turning a risky cup into a dependable one. Your reusable bottle would fit right in, though the hydration reminders now are bells and habit. Bread wants attention next, the kneading bowl, wood-scarred smooth by years of strong hands, waits like a friend who always arrives early. Flour is measured by feel and by the scoop that knows its own size. In many households, a leaven lives on the interior of the bowl itself, a sour memory that wakes when flour and warm water touch it. Someone sprinkles in a pinch of salt that travelled farther than most neighbours will travel this year. The dough gathers itself and then resists, then yields in long, slow moments until it is one story told well. If there's a hand quern in the corner, it has already sung its rough, steady song this morning as grain became meal. Otherwise, the sacks came yesterday from the mill, where water does the heavy work and the miller takes his share. Honestly, today, more or less. The loaves rest under a cloth whose edges are embroidered, not for beauty alone, but for identification at the oven used by several families. Compared to a modern bread machine, this is slower, but it is also legible. Every step is visible and, if needed, negotiable. If you're tempted to say artisan, resist. Here it is just breakfast and perhaps lunch. Children, if they are small, are folded into the morning the way ingredients are folded into batter, quietly without fuss and with an eye toward keeping lumps from forming. An older child tries a task slightly too big for them, because that is how task and child both grow. A grandparent takes a seat near the warmth and ties threads into a ball that will not run away later. The rhythm of the house is inclusive. Jobs are not announced by committee, they are detected and absorbed. A chicken finds its voice in the yard and is negotiated with by someone carrying a scoop of grain. The pig sniffs the day and comments. The cow is practical, and the goat is clever in a way that requires consistent fences. Milk, warm from the udder, is carried to a cool place and encouraged toward butter or cheese, with a patience a spreadsheet cannot teach. The churn, if there is one, is a clock you can taste when it strikes. Clothing is as much a morning concern as food. A sleeve is checked at the elbow where it wore thin last month. A sock is mended at the heel while the bread rises. Spinning happens whenever the hands are free enough to be trustworthy. A distaff tucks under an arm, a spindle gathers twist from a practiced flick, and the room acquires a fine drift of useful snow. In many regions, women carry this work like a shadow, letting thread accumulate through the day until the bin is a small promise of tomorrow's cloth. When enough thread exists, it visits the loom. A warp is arranged with the patience normally reserved for delicate negotiations, because that is what it is. The weaver bends time into a pattern you can wear. Dye, when it comes, arrives from plants with their own personalities, madder, wode, welded colours that greet the eyes as if they had names and opinions. Compared to a discount rack under fluorescent light, this system is slower and less forgiving, but strangely kinder. Clothes are investments, then companions. They remember rain alongside you. Call it slow fashion if you like. The people wearing it simply call it clothing. The house itself continues to introduce its features as the day brightens. Walls of timber and woven wattle filled with daub keep wind from being an indoor hobby. The roof, if thatch, is a field turned upside down and tied into the submission. Smoke chooses its path with confidence. It heads up when the weather obliges, and sideways when it does not. A small window opens to the world like a cautious eye. A chest serves as both cupboard and bench, and the lid holds memories in its grain. A chew mark from a time when a puppy was young. A scorch where someone set down a pot without thinking. A carving that began as a flower and decided to be a star. Cleaning is not an event, it is a rhythm. Floors receive swept straw, not because straw is glamorous, but because it is practical, absorbent and patient. Bedding is beaten, and blankets find a cold breeze to argue with for an hour on a hedge. Compared to the modern vacuum, here the settings are sweep and sweep more, and no one pretends the machine will do it for you while you scroll. Hygiene fits into available water and wisdom. Soap exists but is precious, a quiet chemistry of ash and fat that smells of home rather than perfume. Linen serves as towel and as daily cleanser. Rubbing with a clean cloth and a basin of warm water persuades the skin to cooperate. Bathhouses live in some towns, and in some regions steamy rooms offer the kindness of communal warmth. In others, bathing is seasonal and practical rather than daily theatre. Mouths are comforted with sprigs of mint or sage, and hair is tamed with a carved comb that has opinions about tangles. People pursue cleanliness as a form of respect of neighbours, of saints, of themselves, within the limits of time and fuel. Your modern shower, so effortless you could almost forget it as a triumph of engineering, would be admired here as a miracle and worried over as a drain on the woodpile. The morning pushes outward toward the yard and the fields. Tools wake as surely as people do. A faltering handle is tightened with a wedge. A blade is reminded of its edge on a stone, and a cart axle receives attention before the road reminds everyone of its opinion. In this era, energy is a household negotiation. Muscle is the default power source. Human, oxen, horses, where collars and breeding make the work efficient. Augmented by water, where streams can be convinced to help. Wind sometimes offers its strength to mills on open ground. Fire supports the kitchen, the forge, and the potter's dreams. There is no outlet on the wall to solve a problem you created by procrastinating. Tasks are measured against daylight and against your own reserves. It is a management system that pairs ambition with realism. If you ever wondered what sustainability feels like, it feels like stopping when the last usable light leans away from your hands. Out in the fields, the ground tells you what month it is without any need for calendars. The soil is stiff in early spring and cooperative later, then generous, then spent. In many regions, open field systems distribute strips among families, a checkerboard of responsibilities where cooperation is not optional, but trained into the landscape. Ploughing requires teamwork and a tolerance for weather's moods. Harrowing smooths, sowing hopes. Weeding negotiates with plants that thrive on your inattention. In some places, crop rotations are simple. In others, they grow more deliberate, clever with fallow periods and legumes that sweeten the dirt. Manure is a resource, not an inconvenience. Hay is the summer's savings account. You watch the sky the way an accountant watches a ledger. Rain on the right day is compound interest. Rain on the wrong day is the kind of audit no one asked for. The modern mind might ask about schedules, calendars, goals, and productivity systems. They exist, but on different letterhead. Bells from a church or a monastery volunteer to keep time. Market days give the weak a spine. Saints offer feasts that punctuate months with communal permission to eat something you have been saving. Work itself is the calendar. When flax is ripe, you pull flax. When a neighbour's roof is ready to be rethatched, you carry a ladder and become part of a day you will remember in winter. There is no email inbox, but there is a mental list that lives not on paper but in the voice of the person who reminds you that you promised to help with the fence. You could say there are fewer distractions. Then a sheep finds the cabbages and proves distraction is timeless. Inside the house, a different economy hums, made of preservation and small transformations. The garden is a genius of low drama. Leeks that stand bravely through cold, beans drying on their own terms, herbs that turn a plain pot into a meal worth repeating. A shelf acquires jars with ambitions, pickles, syrups, a vinegar that looks ordinary and behaves like a diplomat. A bag of dried apples waits under a cloth. If the sea is reachable, fish arrive salted and ready to be persuaded into a stew. If the forest is near, mushrooms are an occasional gift accepted with caution and a neighbour's advice. Meat is not the star every day. It is a guest you prepare for, your diet's quiet festival. Compared to the constant availability promised by a supermarket, this kitchen runs on seasons and on what the household can convince the future to keep. Midday appears as a practical kindness. Work pauses without making a speech about it. Bread is cut on a wooden board polished by years of crumbs. A pot gives up what it has created, pottage of grains and greens, perhaps a shred of meat if today was a lucky day at the market, or a generous morning in the yard. A wooden spoon is passed to someone who never takes the first taste for themselves as a rule of domestic diplomacy. The table is a plank on trestles, strong and portable because rooms change jobs in houses like these. Conversation is simple, and it means more because everyone is present. The subjects are food and weather and people, which is to say the building blocks of any civilization's group chat. Humour arrives as it always does, gently about the goat's attempt to earn a surname, or about the miller who swears he has turned over a new leaf and seems to have turned it back again. After the meal, the day chooses whether to lean back toward the fields or lean inward toward the household's quieter industries. Spinning is a constant, steadying the mind the way walking does. Mending recruits anyone with eyes and patience. Leather straps regain dignity under a needle. A broken pot receives a metal staple if someone in town is handy with such things. Small children are given tasks that work even when halfway completed. Sorting, fetching, carrying messages to a neighbour that do not lose importance when repeated with embellishment. A teenager practices a skill that might one day be their trade, fitting a plank, setting hoop to barrel, learning the precise point at which iron glows the colour that means now. In a corner, a simple counting board works as abacus for someone who needs to keep track of eggs or debts. Numeracy and literacy are not absent. They live wherever they are useful, which is often, and they build outward when time allows. Not every house looks like this one, and not every day agrees to be typical. In towns, space compresses and privacy is a luxury. Upper floors lean toward each other, like friends in a secret. Workbenches open onto streets because light is precious. Crafts cluster where supply and demand shake hands. Tanners near water, smiths near fuel, potters wherever clay behaves. Monasteries and convents offer a different pattern. Prayer wraps the day like a belt, and labour fits between its notches. Scribes turn silence into a library. Hospital care, such as it is, gathers under these roofs. Food for travellers, a clean palate, herbs and meds that respect both seasons and scripture. A monastery's kitchen might feed more people than your whole village on a feast day. A convent's garden might invent tomorrow's remedy. If today's world has community centres and clinics, these places offer a medieval rhyme. Sickness, when it visits, rewrites the schedule with a heavy hand. In many households, care is not outsourced. It is enacted by people who are already busy. Fever is watched. Broth becomes a sacrament. Windows are opened or closed by theories that may be right or wrong, but are always hard-working. Remedies are applied without fanfare. A willow bark infusion is not a brand. It is a tree and a habit. Prayer is not a last resort, it is a language for concern. Compared to a modern clinic, this is under-equipped and over-invested with feeling. Yet if you have ever sat beside a friend's bed and counted breaths in the quiet, you understand the essence of it. A small joke survives here too, because humour is medicine. The patient is promised they will return to chores soon, and this is presented as both threat and blessing. Security remains a gentle preoccupation. Locks exist, but trust is cheaper and often more reliable when everyone can describe the contents of your cart from memory. Night watch is communal where it exists. In some regions, village courts called by different names handle small disputes with big usefulness. Fences, fines, missing geese, hurt feelings repaired with public apologies and a measure of grain. Lords and officials make heavier judgments when they must, and taxes or dues are collected in forms that stack. Not just coin, which is scarce, but grain, Labour Days, a pig at the right season. No one loves this arrangement. Many accept it the way people accept weather, by building habits around it. If modern life has insurance policies and police reports, the medieval version has pledges, oaths, and neighbours who remember everything. And always, the day balances work with meaning, sometimes by insisting the work take place inside meaning. A fragment of scripture learned by heart repeats itself while hands busy themselves. A charm sewed into a child's hem accompanies them unnoticed. A small carved cross hung by the door interrupts, leaving, with a touch that reorders worries. Festivals punctuate the year so that time does not become a featureless cloth. The first plough day neighbours gather to help, and the last harvest day neighbours gather to say, "We did it," and to ask for rain that is polite when it visits the thatch. If you are looking for mental health strategies, you will find them here in methods too old to have labels: song, companionship, rhythm, and the modest pride of a task completed in good time. Afternoons have a way of tilting into errands, repairing a section of fence that chose the exact wrong moment to stop being a fence, carrying a message to someone who lives a lane and a field away. walking to the stream with laundry and letting conversation do half the rinsing. News arrives without punctuation, and most of it is practical. A flock was seen where a flock should not be. The mill will be inspected next month, be ready to argue gently about tolls. The distant road is said to be safe again if you go early, and return before shadows have too much to say. You collect these notices the way you collect eggs, carefully, into something that can carry them home. They matter, and they reward the memory. Compared to push notifications, they're fewer and better tended. In all this, challenges are constant but rarely theatrical. Scarcity visits in late winter, and every household knows how to make a small portion behave generously. A larger pot of broth, a thicker slice of kindness. Weather argues in public, and roofs must be persuaded to remain committed to their jobs. Tools break as if in sympathy with bones grown tired, and both are set right with patience. Travel is not impossible, it is expensive in time and attention, so journeys are chosen the way you might choose a book for a long evening, for a reason and with provisions. Safety is never guaranteed, but risk is managed by caution, by company, and by a collection of stories that end with, "and I came back at noon." By now the morning has established itself as the day's scaffolding. Systems you barely noticed at the start, the shared well, the oven that serves several families, the line of geese that volunteer to defend the yard better than any bell, reveal themselves as the infrastructure. The difference from today is not that people lack systems, but that the systems are human cell and therefore fragile and therefore cherished. If a baker falls ill, the village negotiates breakfast. If a bridge loses its nerve, the village becomes a ferry with extra hands and careful feet. If a neighbour runs out of salt, someone who went to market last week becomes a store with an address that answers when you knock. Before the light begins its long slide, bread returns to the table, this time crusted and good-tempered, and the room collects what it needs for the first serious meal. Butter leaves its own small sunrise on a knife. A dish of greens proves that virtue can be delicious when seasoned by hunger and herbs. Someone sets down a wooden cup close to the warm brick so it will not complain when filled. The door opens and closes, each time letting in a different piece of afternoon. If you listen, there is a far bell that turns hours into something like music. You might think of your calendar alerts. They would be welcome here if they brought with them a small wedge of cheese. A modern comparison gathered gently. Imagine a life in which your devices were muscle and memory, your apps were neighbours, your cloud was the sky, you read for news. You would depend on routine, yes, but also on craft and on the unpredictable goodness of meeting someone on a path who knows exactly what you need to know. You might sleep better for the exhaustion of physical work, and you might wake at night as many surely did, not panicked but companionable with the hour. You would worry about different things. You would be proud of the same things, making something that lasts, feeding the people you love, keeping the hearth faithful and the door sound. Soon enough we will step beyond the threshold and follow the road to the town, to the workbenches and the stalls, to talk of tolls and safety and the honest tricks of commerce. But for today's quiet, let's look once more around this room that performs a household's magic. The bread that began in a bowl is now a certainty. The water that arrived in buckets is tea or broth or comfort. The wool that greeted your knees last night becomes yarn that promises future warmth. The latch will hold tonight as it did last night. The iron trivet has carried pots the way a kind shoulder carries worries. The hearth embers, earlier shy, are now frank in their heat and generous with their usefulness. When the door closes for the evening and the long light lets go, this morning will still be present in the room, shaped into what everyone ate, wore, repaired, learned, and shared. The word dark remains outside on the road that loves a label. In here, life is something else. Patterned, workable, a fabric tightened every morning by the same human hands. If you picture the last circle of firelight sitting on the brick rim like a coin saved for tomorrow, you will also see the day's new coin, fresh bread on a wooden board laid beside it. Both are wealth you can feel without counting, and as the house heaves its small sigh before the chores of evening, the hearth remembers the promise it kept at dawn and prepares, with a quiet red smile, to keep it again. The iron latch lifts, and afternoon air greets your face with the honest cool of moving weather. You take the path that knows your boots, Ruts glossed by old rain, hedges rehearsing birdsong, a stone at the bend shaped like a sleeping dog that persuades everyone to lower their voice. A stick meets your hand because rhythm is a kind of map. In these centuries, roads are less empires promise than communities compromise. You move by landmarks, lightning-struck oak, cottage with the roof that wears a hat, counting distance by memory, 2 stories to the ford, 1 hymn to the crossroad. Companionship is the safest gear. Peddlers pass with packs that contain the world in small needles, ribbon, pins, a mirror gone thoughtful with age, and prices tucked behind their smiles. Pilgrims carry badges that shine like tin prayers. If the road meets water, you read the ford's mood, or pay the ferryman who practices punctuality as a trade. Bridges levy their tolls with the dignity of wood that stayed through winter. Shrines punctuate miles. Fingers touch weathered posts the way you might tap a friend's sleeve before parting. The town gathers from the lanes the way bread rises from patient dough. Suddenly it is there, and of course it was coming. A modest gatehouse hints at authority. A ditch and a palisade where they exist say, "We intend to continue." On market day, the square is a page of quick handwriting. Stalls lean together like neighbours swapping remedies. Air tries on several jobs. Smoke near cook shops, damp wool, ale yeast, and the sharp certainty of iron. If you stand still, the place organises itself around your noticing. Coin circulates, but not everywhere. A silver penny has teeth marks to prove it has met scepticism. Credit does steady work. A tally stick at the alehouse keeps score in honest notches to be evened after harvest. Barter runs on etiquette. Eggs for a measure of salt. A morning mending a fence for bread through winter. Wool promised at St. John's for nails now, because roofs have opinions and weather is persuasive. Receipts live in witnesses' heads. Reputation is the court that never adjourns. Weights and measures have their own little stage. Official stones sit by the market cross so scales can prove they mean well. Bread and ale, watched by officers in some towns, honour the season's price of grain, with loaves that match their promise and mugs that stop at fairness. A crier's bell gathers ears. News arrives legibly. Fair next week, mill inspection. Thursday, stray pig answers to Rowan and should be collected before it applies for citizenship. Compared to modern regulation, this is local, visible, and hard to ignore. You know the crier's shoes, and the crier knows who bakes the bread that lifts the town's mood. Craft is the town's biography written in hands. At the smithy, heat speaks in colour. A bar softens. The hammer converses through the handle. Hinges, knives, and hoes line up like the alphabet of usefulness. Across the lane, a cooper rings a barrel into coherence, hoop meeting stave with the approval of long practice. The tanner works downwind by general agreement, turning hides into a future that doesn't leak. A potter coaches clay through a firing that relies on judgment more than certainty. Textiles occupy half the town's imagination. Wool sent to the fuller's mill, linen moving from field to spindle to loom, dyers coaxing plant secrets into colour. Where guilds are strong, charters tuck skills into ranks. Where they aren't, families and custom do the teaching. Apprentices begin with sweeping and tool care and discover year by year that their hands can persuade the world. Foodcraft gives the square its weather. Bakers rise in darkness so others don't have to. Ovens keep a heat domestic hearths can't risk. Alewives and brewers keep fermentation both safe and interesting. Spices, when coin allows, carry the scent of places most will never see. Cook shops offer practical comfort, a pottage that makes thrift taste generous, a pie that is a small edible promise. If you have ever wavered in a food court, imagine the same choice decided by a voice asking, "Are you hungry or just curious?" Protection here is a practice, not a guarantee. Walls and gates help where they exist. Elsewhere, watchfulness is communal. Curfew settles streets. Lamps are expensive, so darkness is a partner as much as a problem. On the road, danger is usually weather and chance, with a seasoning of men who prefer other people's property. You travel in company, choose your hour, carry a letter of protection if you have a patron willing to lend you their seal, the medieval version of persuasive stationery. Churches sometimes hold the right of sanctuary. Monasteries offer a safer bed than the livelier alehouse. None of it is heroic. Most of it is prudence. Information takes the channels it can find. The churchyard is a bulletin board. Sermon stitch news to council. The crier's voice is the day's push notification. Minstrels compress headlines into rhyme, which makes memory restful. Pilgrims bring stories that widen horizons. Merchants bring prices and bridge reports. If the internet is a web, this is a braid. Song, prayer, rumour, ledger, plaited by people who remember who stood nearby when they heard what. Law visits the market in brisk form. Pie powder courts, dusty feet justice settle disputes that start between stalls, a measure accused of optimism, a cloth that misbehaved, a goose whose loyalties are disputed. Larger quarrels wait for slower tables, but for most traders, this quick fairness keeps the square from boiling over. Think very small claims court, moderated by reputation and the knowledge that you will all be here next week. You buy what you came for, and because you're human, something you did not plan. Linen for shirts that will forgive labour. A fist of iron nails because the roof likes conversation. A plug of salt that leaves the sea's aftertaste on your palm. Perhaps a skein of blue thread, because blue seems to understand hope. You pocket prices and rumours with the same care. Toll still high at the bridge, the road east passable if you go early. Geese forming a committee again. If you sit a while at an alehouse bench, you'll hear boast, advice, and the sort of half-joke that survives hard seasons. You leave before the second cup misjudges your walking pace. On the way out, a posted charter, where a town is lucky enough to have one, states rights the place means to keep. Market days confirmed, tolls capped, liberties named. Not every seal keeps its promise, but parchment plus witnesses plus memory lets a town negotiate with tomorrow. It is municipal code with wax. Homeward, the road repeats itself, but the light is new. You walk with two others because review is safer and more pleasant than silence. A hawk writes its name on the sky. Carts complain in their favourite ruts. At the ford, water shows off and then relents. Distance is once more measured in the old units. One story to the hedgerow, one prayer to the lane. And then the latch again, familiar weight, faithful sound. What you carried becomes infrastructure. Nails into roof, salt into winter, linen into shirts and next year's patches. The story of prices and roads joins the household vocabulary. Craft learned by watching becomes a small improvement at your bench. A hinge that swings without grievance, a seam that agrees to behave. A borrowed plane returns to its neighbour along with thanks, and a promise to show up at harvest. What did the day teach? That exchange isn't only coin and goods, it is trust, attention, and the memory of fair dealing. That craft is a language, hands reading materials as surely as eyes read lines. That protection is part wall, part custom, mostly company. Compared to our tracked packages, standardised scales, and 12 different ways to pay, this system is slower and narrower. It also ties meaning to faces. The crier's bell, the smith's forearms, the baker's early lamp, these are the infrastructure of belonging. Hang the cloak where it can forgive damp. Lay the salt near the warm bricks, because salt dislikes our climate as much as anyone. Set the linen on the chest. Tomorrow it becomes labour, and then comfort. Outside, the town keeps working. A barrel finished, a loaf judged, a dispute settled before it learned to raise its voice. Inside, afternoon tilts to evening, the hour when stories iron out the day's creases and candles are promoted from potential to plan. Soon we'll sit in the circle of light, letting talk repay the miles. Roots that proved kind, remedies that behaved, saints who might accept a feast of fish and patience. We will count small fortunes, a serviceable knife, a reliable word, dry kindling under the eaves, and let the geese keep their opinions. As the first star finds the roofline and pretends to have invented light, the latch does its last duty, honest as ever. The room receives you, errands and all, and the age everyone calls dark reveals again what it truly is, a choreography of modest exchanges that keep the hearth fed and the door sound. What remains is the evening, stories and steadiness, first sleep and second the wider meaning people made in a narrow circle of light. That is for part 4. For now, set your bag down, warm your hands on the wooden cup, and let the day become past tense. Evening turns the room to night mode without asking. The horn window slips from pearl to slate. The hearth gathers itself into a quiet red, and the bench remembers the weight it carried yesterday. A wooden cup warms a pair of hands. The iron latch rests, pleased with its day's last duty. Supper is practical kindness, bread, a patient pot of grains and greens, perhaps a shred of meat that behaves like a rumour rather than a headline. Salt arrives, does its good work, and sits down. Compared to our tap and deliver habits, this meal is slower and more polite. It's a gift from your earlier self. Company makes the room larger. A neighbour steps in. A grandparent minds the best angle of heat. Children orbit until gravity wins. The day is retold the way goods were unpacked, carefully, with an eye toward what will matter tomorrow. Prices at the square become weather. Actual weather earns commentary worthy of scripture. The miller's new apprentice looks promising, and the geese everyone agrees are still political. Meaning doesn't arrive as a sermon. It condenses from talk. A proverb lands where it belongs. A lost glove is found in the finder's own sleeve. Someone reports a ribbon tied to the shrine by the ford. Hope threaded to wood in a colour the river approves. If wisdom here is a library, its catalogue lives in memory and is announced between sips. Music survives the day's work. A pipe finds 3 faithful notes. A drum, maybe just skin over a small hoop, keeps a heartbeat the room can share. Where coin and luck have smiled, a fiddle draws a line of sound that ties the evening together. In a monastery, the office sets voices like stones in an arch. In a cottage, a simple song lets the room exhale. There's no playlist. There are a handful of songs and a willingness to sing them. The calendar is grown, not printed. Feast days fasten the seasons. Candlemas steadying winter. A spring saint excusing the first feast of greens. Midsummer fires confessing the sun's generosity. Harvest festivals wrapping relief in a tune. Advent in early winter teaches waiting that feels like a task. Compared to our crowded planners, this calendar talks back in bread, light and company. Rest here is often active. A net is mended while a story supports it. A strap remembers its future under needle and awl. A sleeve learns restraint from a patch. Thread gathers on the spindle as talk gathers in the room. These are not chores against leisure. They are its companions, giving the mind something gentle to lean on. Night has offices. Animals are checked. The small gate is fastened. The ladle dips once, promising morning. In towns, curfew settles streets. A bell counts to calm, not control. A watchman's star finds stone at intervals chosen to reassure. Protection is thinner than ours. No cameras, no locks in every room. But it is present in custom, neighbours, and this kind of memory that keeps score. Sanctuary sometimes is a church door. Hospitality often is a blanket on a clean corner of floor. Safety is a practice. Worry keeps a chair, because honesty helps sleep. A cough that lingers, a thatch that wants attention, a field that needs the weather to remember its manners. Fear isn't denied or indulged. People answer it with proportion. A clean cloth, broth. A promise to check the ridgepole at first light. A neighbour trading days in the weeds. Small rituals, rue above a lintel, a chalk mark at the year's turn, a verse that knows the way through a difficult hour, steady the hand without requiring certainty. Light governs thought. Tallow and rush make a smaller day and minds move at a kinder pace. Jokes land softly enough to avoid waking the baby. Tales, older than anyone present, stretch their legs. Wolves that keep contracts. Saints that debate politely with rain. Kings who learn ruling a household is already a large assignment. Nobody takes notes. A good story here is not a monument but a sweater. It keeps you warm and fits again next winter. Beyond the roof, the sky lends order. Constellations carry local names. Plough, cart, swan, because usefulness is the first astronomy. The moon is both clock and counsel. A clear night makes the fields legible. A clouded one makes the house the whole world. Sailors and shepherds read what the sky writes long before scholars bind it into books. You don't need theory to let your mind steady itself against something larger than the hedge. Between first sleep and second, many wake briefly without alarm. The embers approve, someone checks the latch and enjoys finding it faithful. Someone adds a stick and calls it kindness to morning. A couple uses the pause for the conversation daylight forgot to make room for. A small remedy steeps because darkness suits it. This isn't insomnia, it is intermission. Your smartwatch would suggest a breathing exercise. The embers say, we've got it. Charity keeps a corner ready. A bowl goes to a neighbour whose larder has had a thin week. A traveller earns a blanket and the sort of blessing that uses few words and all available warmth. In monasteries, the infirmary saves a pallet and a shelf where herbs wait like letters already addressed. Hospitality is not decoration, it's policy against fear. If the world is uncertain, the solution is more certain tables. The age's challenges sit here too, trimmed to human size. Travel asks for nerve and friends, medicine for time, luck, clean water, cloth, food for seasons that keep their promises, authority for dues that arrive as regularly as weather and with similar sympathy. Yet the list feels sortable by firelight. What can be changed is tomorrow's first job. What cannot be changed is laid down without argument. Shared answers are modest and strong. Keep vows a size you can carry. Repair before replacing. Eat together when possible. Teach children the names of tools and stars and virtues in any order that keeps them listening. Let feast days be bright enough to escort you through lean ones. Let grief be real so it can be finished. These rules are unremarkable and therefore durable. Across a life, nights like this do shaping work. Weddings pull two nets of help into one. Christenings braid hope to names. Funerals lend hands to sorrow until sorrow can stand. The same bench holds laughing and weeping. The same spoon touches feast and fast. Novelty has its dazzles. Durability has its mercies. A chair that remembers you is better than a trend that doesn't. A small laugh belongs to bedtime. Someone reports a goat who learned the gait and now supervises. Someone praises the crier's improved phrasing for lost pig. Humour here is local, and therefore forgiving. It oils the hinge so the day can close without complaint. The room settles. The candle admits it has said enough. The hearth draws itself small, like a cat choosing a spot. Wool climbs the body with its old, considerate weight. Straw remembers your shoulders and suggests the same plan as last night. Think of what these evenings teach. How to sit with time until it stops fidgeting. How to let meaning accumulate like stew, slowly, from simple things, until it's undeniable. The world outside keeps its weather and opinions. Inside, light is organised on purpose, and close your eyes. The small circle of firelight from our first night waits behind your eyelids, steady as a kept vow. The latch holds. The cup cools. The blanket remembers. If modern life offers brightness on demand, this life offers warmth on purpose. Brightness is easy. Warmth is work. And because it is work, it is also meaning. Let that warmth linger on the bricks a while, and let your breath join it, small and regular, until sleep signs its name across the room. And so, our journey for tonight comes to a quiet close. The story lingers, like the last glow of candlelight, as you drift further into rest. If these gentle wanderings bring you peace, I invite you to like and subscribe so that whenever you wish, you may return, and we can travel together once more. For now, dear listener, may your dreams be kind, and your night be restful. Until next time,